Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving into, well, a pretty defining moment in modern computing, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The clock is officially run out on Windows 10.
One of the most popular operating systems ever.
Yeah, exactly. And now, suddenly, hundreds of millions of users are facing a real security risk.
It sounds pretty urgent. The official end of support, or EoS, was yesterday, right? October 14th, 2025.
That's the date. After a solid decade of service, you're looking at potentially over 40% of the entire desktop market.
Wow.
Maybe 500 million machines. They woke up today, October 15th, vulnerable to threats. Microsoft just won't patch anymore. Not for free anyway.
So our mission today is sort of twofold.
Right.
First, we need to chart a course, find the paths to safety for, the everyday user, the small business caught in this Windows 10 situation.
And
Second, we're doing a deep technical dive. We're looking at high-stakes enterprise data protection.
VMware vSphere.
Exactly. Specifically, those 10 essential best practices for keeping VMware data truly resilient, especially using tools like Veeam.
Yeah, it's critical stuff.
Yeah.
And whether you're just an individual staring at an aging PC that can't run Windows 11,
Or you're the IT pro managing massive virtual environments.
the core theme is identical, really. It's about resilience. It's about ensuring your data is available even when your main platform, be it your desktop OS or your hypervisor, is compromised or simply too old.
So this is basically the essential guide for navigating this forced upgrade cycle and keeping your data safe.
That's the goal. Let's jump right in.
Okay, let's start with the immediate crisis. Windows 10, end of support, EoS. You mentioned Windows 10 is now frozen in time. Can you break that down a bit? What does that lack of support actually mean for someone just, checking email or browsing?
Well, the computer itself doesn't just brick overnight.
Right.
Your desktop looks the same, your files are there, your apps mostly still work. Functionally, it's stable, but the protection pipeline, that's been shut off.
So no more updates.
No more free automatic security updates. After 10 years of Microsoft consistently patching holes, fixing bugs, adding features, that obligation is gone. They won't plug those security vulnerabilities anymore.
And the immediate danger of running an unsupported OS, especially one with such a massive user base, what's the big risk?
Oh, the risk just skyrockets instantly. Hackers are pragmatic. They go where the targets are plentiful and where they know exploits won't get fixed.
Makes sense.
So when maybe 40% of the desktop world goes unsupported overnight, that's a gold mine for cybercriminals. Any new vulnerability found in Windows 10 code now.
Becomes permanent.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
permanent, unpackable hole. That machine connected to the internet, it's now officially operating at your own risk.
The obvious answer seems to be, okay, just upgrade to Windows 11. But that's the core of the problem, isn't it? Microsoft put up some pretty major hardware roadblocks.
Huge barriers. Unprecedented, really.
So what's stopping this, you said, staggering number of perfectly good PCs from just making that leap?
It really boils down to a security mandate Microsoft decided to enforce with Windows 11. They wanted a higher baseline security level.
Okay.
And the main gatekeeper for that is the Trusted Platform Module, or TPM. Specifically, you need version 2.0.
Right, the TPM chip. That's a hardware thing.
It's a secure crypto processor. It's hardware designed specifically to handle things like encryption keys and making sure the system hasn't been tampered with during boot.
So it's not just about having a fast enough CPU, it's this specific security chip.
Precisely. And you also need UEFI system firmware, not the old BIOS, and secure boot capability enabled within that UEFI.
And those requirements together.
They exclude a vast number of older but still perfectly capable PCs. Think machines bought between, say, 2014 and 2017.
Machines still widely used?
Absolutely. In schools, small businesses, homes. For a company, replacing maybe thousands of these functional computers just to meet a TPM spec, that's a massive cost.
And for individuals, it's often just wasteful, creates e-waste.
Exactly. It's a sustainability nightmare for a lot of people.
Okay, so if you're stuck with that older hardware, the sources point to basically 3 main paths forward, starting today. Let's take path A first. Buying some time with the Extended Security Updates program, the ESU.
Right, the ESU. Microsoft is very clear. This is a temporary bridge.
Yeah.
It's not meant as a long-term solution.
A bridge to where? To eventually upgrading hardware.
Pretty much. It extends the flow of critical security updates for exactly 1 more year.
Just 1 year.
1 year. Pushing that final deadline out to October 13, 2026, it's really aimed at organizations, giving them breathing room to audit their systems and plan replacements.
It's basically a paid subscription, right? And the pricing, especially for businesses, seems designed to really push them to upgrade sooner rather than later.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The structure is meant to be increasingly painful. For commercial organizations, it's $61 per device for that first year.
Okay, $61 per machine.
But here's the kicker.
Mm-hmm.
That price doubles each year after that for up to 3 years total.
Doubles.
Doubles. So imagine a company with, say, 1,000 devices. Year 1 is $61,000.
Out.
Year 2, $122,000. Year 3, $244,000. Just for security patches on old machines.
Wow, okay. That escalating cost is a very strong incentive to move on. But for individual consumers, the price starts lower, right?
Yeah.
$30 for the first year.
Correct. 30 US for year 1 for consumers. But interestingly, we found several ways consumers can actually get it for free.
Free ESU, how does that work?
Well, there are 3 main avenues. First, and this is pretty significant, Microsoft made ESU completely free for all users located in the European Economic Area.
The EEA, so like the EU plus a few others.
Exactly. That covers a huge number of people right off the bat.
Yeah.
Geopolitics playing a role there, it seems.
Interesting. Okay, what about everyone else outside the EEA?
For users globally, there are 2 pretty easy paths. First, you can redeem 1,000 Microsoft rewards points.
Rewards points, the ones you get for using Bing or Xbox.
Yep, exactly those.
Yeah.
If you're already using Microsoft services, hitting 1,000 points isn't usually that hard. It makes the ESU effectively free.
Okay, that's one way. What's the third option? You mentioned it seems designed to pull users deeper into the Microsoft ecosystem.
Ah, yes, the OneDrive connection. You can also enroll for free just by using Windows Backup and making sure you sync your Windows settings to your OneDrive account.
So use their cloud service, get free security updates.
Precisely. Microsoft is clearly leveraging the EoS situation to boost adoption of OneDrive and, by extension, potentially Microsoft 365.
But you mentioned a catch. If the ESU enrollment itself is free via OneDrive Sync, how might you end up paying anyway?
It comes down to storage limits. Remember, Microsoft only gives you 5 GB of free OneDrive storage.
Right, not a lot these days.
Not at all. And the Windows Backup tool encourages you to back up more than just settings, maybe documents, pictures. If you start syncing more data and exceed that 5 GB free tier...
You have to pay for more storage.
Exactly. You'll likely need to subscribe to a paid Microsoft 365 plan to get more cloud storage. So you might dodge the $30 ESU fee directly, but end up paying a monthly subscription for the storage needed to activate the free ESU offer. Pretty clever, really.
Sneaky but clever.
Yeah.
Okay, so regardless of how you enroll, paid or free, you need to be on the latest version of Windows 10 first, right?
Yes, absolutely. You must be running Windows 10 version 22H2, fully patched. Then you need to go into your Windows Update settings and look for the specific enrollment wizard link.
But again, this ESU path, it's just kicking the can down the road for a year.
It is. It buys time, nothing more. Which leads us to Path B.
Right, Path B. This one feels, well, maybe the most controversial. It's the community-driven approach. Doing an unofficial upgrade by bypassing those hardware requirements like TPM 2.0. Why are so many people going this route?
Because their hardware is still good. That's the main driver. Millions of users look at the options. Pay $30 for just 1 year of ESU, buy a brand new machine they don't feel they need, or...
Find a workaround.
Exactly. Find a way to install a fully supported, secure Windows 11 onto the hardware they already own.
Right.
It's become this huge sort of grassroots movement online.
Okay, so what are the main methods people are actually using to get around these checks? The sources detailed a few.
One of the most popular and generally considered pretty reliable by the tech community involves using third-party tools. Rufus is the big one.
Rufus, that tool for making bootable USB drives.
That's the one. Newer versions of Rufus have built-in options specifically designed to handle this. When you use it to create your Windows 11 installation USB,
It can tweak the installer?
yes, it can automatically enable the necessary bypasses. It tells the installer to skip the TPM check, the secure boot check, even the minimum RAM check. Makes the whole process pretty straightforward for users.
And what about people who are comfortable with the command line? Are there tricks for running the setup directly?
Yes, there's a well-known command line method, especially if you're upgrading an existing Windows 10 installation without wanting to wipe everything. Normally, you just run setup.exe from the installation media. But to trigger the bypass, you open a command prompt in that same location and run setup.prep.exe product server.
Hang on, product server, why are you telling it you're installing Windows Server?
That's the hack. It's an older trick that still seems to work. Apparently, the server installation path historically had less stringent hardware checks compared to the consumer versions.
Ah, interesting.
So running that command often fools the setup process into skipping those specific Windows 11 client hardware checks, the TPM, secure boot, etc. This lets you upgrade directly to the latest Windows 11 version, like 24H2 or maybe even the upcoming 25H2, while keeping all your existing files and settings intact.
What about some of the older methods people tried, like editing the registry?
Yeah, the registry edits. Things like manually creating a key called lab config and adding specific DWORD values like bypass TPM check or bypass secure boot check.
Were those effective?
They were popular early on. But sources suggest their reliability now is, well, inconsistent. It seems Microsoft actively patches these registry loopholes with major Windows updates.
So it's a cat and mouse game.
Exactly. Which is why methods that modify the installation media itself, like using Rufus or using that specific setup prep command line trick,
Yep.
tend to be more reliable long-term. They work at a different stage of the process.
Okay, so if millions are successfully using these bypass methods, running Windows 11 on technically unsupported hardware, is Microsoft kind of setting itself up for a weird support situation down the line? They officially ignore these installs, right?
That's the big unanswered question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It raises serious points about long-term support and security integrity. Microsoft insisted the TPM requirement was crucial for security.
Non-negotiable, they said.
Right. So now, if a significant chunk of their user base is running Windows 11 on hardware Microsoft themselves deemed insecure, what happens? Do they quietly provide updates anyway? Or do they risk cutting off millions if a major vulnerability emerges that specifically exploits the lack of, say, TPM 2.0?
A real dilemma for them.
It is. The general consensus seems to be, yes, running Windows 11 on unsupported hardware works today, and you generally get updates. But you are officially operating without Microsoft's blessing and potentially taking on unknown future risks.
Okay, that covers the unofficial route. Let's look at Path C. Path C feels like the most radical departure, but maybe the most secure and sustainable in the long run. Wiping Windows 10 completely and installing a totally free, lightweight OS designed specifically to give older hardware a new lease on life.
This is a fantastic option, especially for anyone put off by the ESU cost or worried about the risks of unofficial Windows upgrades. The core idea is really simple. If your hardware struggles with modern Windows, pick an OS that needs fewer resources but still gets constant modern security updates.
And the sources highlight two main contenders here.
That's right. Two main paths within this path, you could say.
Okay, let's start with Chrome OS Flex, Google's offering. Who's the ideal user for this?
Chrome OS Flex is perfect if your work or your computing life in general happens mostly inside a web browser.
So, web apps, cloud services.
Exactly. Think students, maybe call center agents, anyone using VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, or heavily relying on Google Docs, Microsoft 365 web apps, things like that. It's a fundamental shift towards a browser-centric experience.
What are the big advantages of switching to Chrome OS Flex, besides just being free?
Speed and security are the headline features. It's known for being incredibly fast. Devices boot up in just a few seconds.
Much faster than Windows, usually.
Yeah. And they generally don't suffer from that gradual slowdown you often see with Windows over time. Security is also built in and proactive.
How so?
It uses sandboxing extensively, it blocks running traditional executable files by default, and it has verified boot-to-check system integrity. What that means practically is you don't need traditional antivirus software.
No antivirus needed. That's a big change.
It is. Plus, it updates automatically in the background, usually every 4 weeks or so. You're always running the latest secure version without having to think about it.
You touched on sustainability earlier, too. How does Chrome OS Flex help there?
It's a core part of their pitch. The idea is that the most sustainable device is the one you already own.
Right, avoiding e-waste.
Exactly. Chrome EoS Flex is certified to run on over 400 different older PC and Mac models, many of which are exactly the kind of machines that failed the Windows 11 compatibility tests. So it dramatically extends the useful life of that hardware.
Is there data on energy use?
Yeah, Google claims that on average, devices running Chrome EoS Flex use about 19% less energy compared to their previous OS.
That translates to real savings, especially for organizations.
Absolutely. Lower energy bills mean a lower cost of ownership, or
Yeah.
TCO. And less e-waste is obviously better for the environment.
It sounds like a compelling case, especially for certain use cases. But the trade-off is significant, isn't it? You're basically giving up traditional Windows software.
That's the deal. You commit to the browser. If you need more local power, more control, or access to specific desktop applications, then the other free OS option becomes more attractive. Linux.
Okay, Linux. the customizable power option, as the sources called it. Who benefits most from switching to Linux?
Linux is great if you want deep control over your system, top-notch security, and often a noticeable performance boost on older hardware that might feel sluggish under Windows. It's ideal for, say, developers, engineers, scientists, or even just tech-savvy hobbyists who need access to a wider range of tools, especially open-source ones.
But for someone coming straight from Windows, Linux often seems intimidating, complex. Are there versions that are easier for beginners?
Definitely. The Linux world has come a long way in user-friendliness. For someone new, we strongly recommend distributions or distros that consciously try to mimic the look and feel of Windows.
To make the transition smoother.
Exactly. Top recommendations are usually Linux Mint, especially the Cinnamon desktop version,
Mint Cinnamon. Okay.
and Zorin OS. Both are well known for offering a user interface that feels very familiar if you're used to Windows XP or Windows 7. A very gentle learning curve.
Any others?
Ubuntu is always a solid choice too. It has a massive online community for support, which is great for beginners. And the latest long-term support version, Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, comes with an amazing 12 years of support.
12 years. That's incredible longevity.
It really is. Far longer than Windows support cycles.
Let's talk software. If I ditch Windows for Linux Mint, what applications do I lose and what can I use instead?
The main thing you lose is native access to proprietary Windows software. So no installing the desktop versions of Microsoft Word or Excel or Adobe Photoshop, for instance.
What are the alternatives?
Well, most things are web apps now anyway, so you can still easily access the web versions of Microsoft 365 in your browser. For local software, you gain access to incredibly powerful free open source alternatives. The standard Office suite is LibreOffice.
LibreOffice that has Writer, Calc, Impress, like Word, Excel, PowerPoint equivalent.
Exactly. They're very capable and compatible with Microsoft Office file formats. For graphics, the go-to is GIMP, which is a very powerful alternative to Photoshop. There are strong open source options for almost every category.
How difficult is the actual installation process? Is it still a very technical thing?
Not really, not anymore. It's become much simpler. You download the installation file, usually an ISO image for the distro you want. Then you use a tool, maybe Rufus again, to write that image to a USB drive to make it bootable.
Same tool as for the Windows bypass.
Yep. Then you boot your computer from that USB stick and follow the on-screen graphical installer. Most are very straightforward now, guiding you through partitioning and setup.
And installing apps afterwards. No more hunting for .exe files.
Generally, no. Most distros have a graphical software manager or app store tool. You just search for the app you want and click install. Or for more advanced users, you use simple command line tools called package managers. Ubuntu and Mint use .deb packages, for example, and installing is usually just one command.
Are there any big system-level differences a new user needs to be aware of, like how files are stored?
Yeah, a couple of things. Linux uses different file systems than Windows. Common ones are XT or maybe XFS, whereas Windows uses NTFS.
Can Linux read my old Windows files on an NTFS drive?
Oh yes, easily. Linux has built-in support to read from and write to NTFS partitions, so accessing your existing data is no problem at all.
What about security? We said Chrome EoS doesn't need antivirus. What about Linux?
Linux security is inherently strong due to its architecture and user permission model. Most distros come with a capable firewall, often pre-configured, like if. And while no OS is totally immune, malware targeting desktop Linux is exceptionally rare compared to Windows. So generally, you don't need to run a traditional antivirus scanner. The baseline security is just much higher than, say, an unsupported Windows 10 system.
So to wrap up part one, whether it's paying for a temporary fix like ESU, using technical workarounds for Windows 11, or making a full switch to something like Chrome ES Flex or Linux Mint, the end of Windows 10 support is really forcing a massive rethink for millions of PC users globally.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's forcing a kind of decoupling. People are realizing that resilience isn't just tied to the latest OS version number. It's about separating the user experience and the data itself from the limited lifespan of the physical hardware underneath.
That idea, decoupling data from hardware, focusing on resilience, that's actually the perfect transition. We're moving from the individual user's crisis to the enterprise data center's absolute need for availability.
Shifting gears completely.
Yep. Let's dive deep now into those 10 best practices for protecting VMware vSphere environments, particularly when using Veeam. Okay, we're in the realm of highly specialized, mission-critical stuff now. For IT pros listening, ensuring resilience starts with the absolute bedrock, doesn't it? That famous 3-2-1 rule. Can you quickly remind us why it's still considered the gold standard? Hashtag tag 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 5, foundational backup strategy.
The 3-2-1 rule is timeless because it's simple and effective. It dictates
Yeah.
you need 3 copies of your data.
3 copies.
Those copies need to be on at least 2 independent types of media, meaning media that won't fail together due to the same cause. Think disk and tape, or maybe disk and immutable cloud storage. They have different failure modes.
Right, and the one.
And one of those copies must be stored off-site and ideally offline or immutable. That last part, off-site and offline immutable, that's your ultimate protection against disasters like fires, floods, or critically these days, ransomware.
That offline or immutable part is key for ransomware, isn't it? So the attackers can't delete or encrypt your backups too.
Absolutely essential. If the backup is logically disconnected or cannot be changed, the ransomware can't touch it.
What are the modern ways to achieve that offline immutable copy? Tape is still an option, but what else?
Tape is still perfectly valid, but today we heavily rely on immutability features, things like S3 object lock and cloud storage, AWS, Azure, Wasabi, etc.
Object lock.
Yeah, it allows you to mark data so it cannot be deleted or altered, even by an administrator account, for a set period. It's write once, read many. Veeam also has its hardened repository feature.
The Linux-based one.
That's the one. It uses Linux capabilities and single-use credentials to make backup files on local disk storage immutable, protecting against deletion or modification, even if the main backup server is compromised.
Okay, so 3-2-1 is the foundation. But before you even start configuring backups, you mentioned 2 crucial planning steps, defining RPO and RTO. Why is getting those defined first so important?
Because RPO and RTO are the business requirements. They dictate everything else. RPO recovery point objective defines how much data loss the business can tolerate.
Like, we can only afford to lose 15 minutes of work.
Exactly. It dictates how frequently you need to back up or replicate. RTO recovery time objective defines how quickly a service needs to be back online after an outage.
The main database must be recovered in under 30 minutes.
Precisely. And those 2 numbers, RPO and RTO, determine all your technical decisions.
How so?
Well, if the business demands a very low RPO, like 5 minutes, and a very low RTO, like 10 minutes, that tells you immediately you need incredibly fast storage, tons of network bandwidth, LAN, WAN, maybe SAN, and beefy CPU, and memory resources on your backup servers, and proxies to handle that workload.
You can't meet aggressive RPorto with slow infrastructure.
Impossible. And one other general point, often overlooked for Windows VMs. You must ensure Microsoft VSS works correctly inside the guest OS.
VSS Volume Shadow Copy Service.
Yes. That's what allows for application-consistent backups of things like SQL Server, Exchange, Active Directory, if VSS fails during the backup.
You get a crash-consistent backup.
Right. Which means the VM might restore, but the application state could be corrupt or inconsistent, requiring manual recovery steps. Checking VSS health is fundamental. Hashtag tag 6. Performance and versioning. Best practice 1.5.9.
All right, let's dig into performance, starting with best practice number 1. Use current versions. Specifically, current versions of Veeam and vSphere. This seems obvious, but what was it about Veeam v11, for example, that made upgrading such a big deal for performance?
Veeam Backup and Replication v11 was a landmark release for performance. It fundamentally changed how the core backup engine worked. The 2 key features were asynchronous read everywhere and unbuffered writes.
Okay, asynchronous read everywhere, what does that actually mean in practice? How does it speed things up?
Think about the Veeam proxy server, the component that reads the data. Before V11, it often worked synchronously, read a block, wait for confirmation, read the next block. Asynchronous reading means the proxy can issue many read requests simultaneously without waiting for each one to complete individually.
So it keeps the data pipe fuller.
Exactly. It allows the proxy to act more like an efficient scheduler, keeping the storage and network busy rather than being limited by the latency of single read operations. This, combined with unbuffered writes to the repository,
Resulted in?
it basically doubled backup write speeds in many scenarios. We saw benchmarks completely maxing out 100 gigabit network connections. It was a massive leap forward. So running older versions means leaving significant performance on the table.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, best practice number 5 seems almost basic. Install and update VMware tools. Why is this simple step so critical for Veeam?
Because VMware tools is the communication channel. It's the essential link between the ESXi hypervisor and the guest operating system running inside the VM, whether that's Windows or Linux. Without tools, Veeam is flying blind trying to interact with the VM.
What specific Veeam functions break if VMware tools are missing or out of date?
Several critical ones. Application-aware image processing, which we just discussed for VSS, absolutely requires tools to talk to the guest OS.
Right, to coordinate the snapshot inside the application.
Precisely. Also, Veeam needs tools to reliably detect the VM's IP address in its operating system version. Without that information, features like file-level recovery indexing might fail. And, importantly, the verification tests in Veeam Sure Backup.
The ones that automatically test your backups.
Yes, things like the heartbeat check, is the OS running, and the ping test, is it responding on the network. Rely on VMware tools reporting that information back to Veeam. No tools, those vital tests fail, giving you a false sense of security. It's truly fundamental.
Simple but crucial. Okay, best practice number 9 is about being proactive, using Veeam 1 for planning. How does Veeam 1 help you find problems before they cause failed backup?
Veeam 1 is the monitoring and reporting arm. You use the monitor component for real-time dashboards and alerts, but the real gold for proactive planning is in the reporter component, specifically running the VM configuration assessment report.
What kind of potential issues does that report flag?
It scans your vSphere environment, looking for configurations known to cause backup problems or inefficiencies. Things like VMs still running really old hardware versions, like version 4 or earlier, which might limit some modern backup features.
Okay, outdated VM hardware. What else?
Critically, it flags data stores running low on free space. Anything less than 10% free space is a huge risk for VMware snapshot operations failing, especially consolidation.
Snapshot stun or failure due to lack of space? Common issue.
Very common. And maybe most importantly, it identifies disks configured in ways that Veeam cannot back up using standard methods. Things like physical raw device mappings, RDMs, or disks marked as independent in the VM settings.
Because those bypass the VMware snapshot process.
Exactly. Finding out you have critical VMs with independent disks before you realize they haven't been backed up properly for months. That's the value of proactive reporting with Veeam 1. It prevents nasty surprises. #tag7. Choosing backup and restore modes. Best practice 2, 3, 7.
Now we get into the real architectural choices. Best practice number 2. Choose your backup transport mode wisely. Veeam offers 3 main ones: network mode, direct storage access, and virtual appliance mode, also known as hot add. But first, you mentioned Veeam tries to bypass VADP sometimes. What's VADP again?
VADP is the VMware vStorage API for data protection. It's VMware's official framework that allows backup software like Veeam to access VM data and take snapshots without disrupting the guest OS.
So why bypass the official way?
Because going through the full VADP stack on the ESXi host can sometimes introduce overhead or performance limitations, especially under heavy load.
Okay, so how does Veeam get around it for better speed?
Veeam has several methods that bypass parts or all of the VADP stack for reading data. The main ones are backup from storage snapshots, which we'll discuss more later, direct NFS access, where Veeam reads directly from an NFS data store, and the virtual appliance, or hot add mode. These direct paths often significantly reduce load on the ESXi hosts and achieve higher throughput.
Let's break down the standard modes then. Network mode, also called MBD. You said it's the simplest.
Yeah, network block device or MBD mode is often the easiest to set up because it just uses the standard ESXi management network interface, VM kernel port, to transfer the backup data.
Pros and cons.
Pro. It works universally, scales easily as you add hosts, and has very low overhead on the hosts themselves. For environments with relatively low data change rates, NBD can actually be surprisingly fast for incremental backups.
And the con?
The main con is that the ESXi management port itself can become a bottleneck, especially if it's just a 1 gigabit connection. Trying to pull multiple large, full VM backups through that single 1 gig pipe can saturate the management network and slow things down considerably.
Okay, so NBD is simple but potentially slow for large volumes. What about hot add or virtual appliance mode? This seems popular but has caveats.
Hot add is popular because it's often much faster. Here, the Veeam backup proxy is itself a virtual machine running within your vSphere cluster.
So the proxy is a VM too.
Right. And during a backup, it uses vSphere API to directly attach the target VM's virtual disks, VMDKs, to itself. It hot adds the disks. Then it reads the data from those attached disks internally and sends it out over the regular VM network, usually a much faster 10 gig or higher connection, bypassing the management network bottleneck.
Sounds great. But you mentioned caveats, especially with NFS storage.
Yes, this is a big one. Hot add is generally not recommended if your VMs are running on NFS data stores.
Why not?
It has to do with how NFS handles file locking. The process of hot adding and reading the VMDK can sometimes conflict with NFS locks, leading to the dreaded VM stun.
A stun, the VM just
Yeah,
freezes.
the guest OS inside the VM pauses or becomes unresponsive for a period. Could be seconds, could be longer, while the storage lock contention is sorted out during the backup. This is obviously bad for production VMs.
Is there any way to safely use hot add with NFS?
There is, but it requires a very specific setup and isn't always practical. The official recommendation is, if you must use hot add on NFS, you need to deploy one dedicated hot add proxy VM per ESX host in the cluster.
One proxy per host.
Yes. And you need to set a specific registry key on each proxy. Enable same host hot add mode 1. This forces Veeam to only use the proxy running on the same physical host as the VM being backed up. This minimizes the cross-host locking issues that cause the stun, but it requires deploying many more proxies.
Okay, complex. Now, speaking of specific storage, best practice number 7 focuses on VMware vSAN. Since vSAN is hyper-converged, distributing data across hosts, how does that affect backup transport modes?
vSAN's architecture changes the game because it doesn't present storage using traditional protocols like Fiber Channel or ISCSI that direct storage access mode relies on.
That mode is out.
Correct.
Yeah.
Direct storage access and backup from storage snapshots are generally unavailable for vSAN. You're limited to using either network NBD mode or hot add mode.
So only NBD or hot add for vSAN, which is better.
The best practice is usually to test both in your specific vSAN environment to see which performs better. However, if you use hot add, the recommendation for proxy placement is critical.
Why? What's the recommendation?
Similar to the NFS caveat, but for different reasons. For vSAN, especially stretched clusters where hosts might be geographically separated.
Like across different data centers.
Exactly. The best practice is often to deploy one small hot add proxy per vSAN host. The goal is to ensure Veeam can always choose a proxy that is physically local to where the majority of the VM's data blocks reside.
To avoid pulling data across the cluster interconnect.
Precisely. If Veeam has to use a proxy on a remote host, especially across a potentially slower stretched cluster DCI, data center interconnect, you generate huge amounts of unnecessary east-west traffic, increase latency, and likely miss your RTO targets. Keeping the proxy close to the data is key for vSAN performance.
Makes sense. Okay, we've picked our backup mode. Best practice number 3 flips the coin. Plan your restore, focusing on RTO. We know instant recovery is key, but how do the transport modes perform for traditional full restores?
For restoring an entire VM or large virtual disks, the performance characteristics often mirror the backup speeds. Hot add is frequently the fastest mode for restores too, as it can write data directly via the VM network.
And network mode.
Network mode is typically the slowest for full restores, again, due to potential management network bottlenecks. Direct storage access can be very fast for restores, but remember its limitation. It generally only restores disks as thick provisioned.
So if my original VM disk was thin provisioned to save space.
Direct storage access restore will likely convert it to thick provisioned, lazy, zeroed on the fly during the restore, which might consume significantly more storage space than you intended. Direct NFS restore is an exception here. It can restore thin.
Good detail. But really, for the best RTO, you want to avoid waiting for a full restore at all, right?
Absolutely. That's the entire point of Veeam's instant VM recovery. It's the ultimate RTO weapon.
How does it work again?
It boots the VM directly from the compressed and deduplicated backup file sitting in the Veeam repository. Veeam presents the backup file to an ESXi host as a temporary NFS data store on the fly.
So the VM runs off the backup storage initially.
Exactly. The VM is back online and users are working again in minutes, sometimes seconds, achieving an incredibly low RTO. Then, while the VM is running, you use either Veeam's quick migration feature or standard VMware storage vMotion to migrate the VM's disks back to your production storage in the background with no further downtime.
Brilliant. And what about scenarios where just a few files are corrupted, or maybe ransomware hit just some blocks? Is there a faster option than restoring the whole VM?
Yes, that's where quick rollback comes in. It's fantastic for those situations.
How does quick rollback work?
It leverages CBT change block, tracking the same technology VMware uses to track changes for incremental backups. If a VM gets corrupted, instead of restoring the entire thing, quick rollback compares the current state with the last good backup using CBT data. It then restores only the specific data blocks that have changed or are missing corrupt.
So it's like patching the VM with the good blocks from the backup.
That's a great way to put it. It can dramatically reduce the restore time compared to a full VM restore, especially for large VMs where only a small amount of data was affected. #tag 8. Advanced concepts in security. Best practice 4, 6, 8, 10.
Okay, let's push into the really advanced strategies now. Best practice number 4, integrating continuous data protection, or CDP. This sounds revolutionary, getting RPOs down from minutes or hours to just seconds.
It really is a game changer for Tier 1 applications that absolutely cannot tolerate data loss. CDP shifts from periodic snapshots to essentially continuous replication.
Replicating every few seconds.
Potentially, yes.
Right.
And critically, it achieves this without using traditional VMware snapshots, which can sometimes impact production VM performance, the stun effect.
So how does CDP work without snapshots? What's the technology?
It uses a VMware framework called vSphere APIs for I/O filtering, often abbreviated as VAIO.
VAIO, what does that do?
VAIO allows certified third-party programs, like Veeam's CDP filter driver, to insert themselves directly into the virtual machine's I/O stream at the hypervisor kernel level.
Intercepting the data writes as they happen.
Exactly. The VIO filter captures every write operation going to the VM's virtual disk as it occurs and streams that data immediately over the network to a replica VM at the target site. This low-level continuous interception is what enables those near-zero RPOs measured in seconds.
If it's constantly streaming data, what are the big infrastructure considerations?
Bandwidth, bandwidth, bandwidth,
Yeah.
and stability.
Yeah.
You absolutely must monitor the typical write I/O rate of your production VMs to accurately size the network connection needed for the CDP replication stream. It's a constant flow.
Any specific network tuning?
Yes. For high-speed links, typically 10 gigabits or faster, Veeam strongly recommends configuring your network switches and VM kernel adapters to use jumbo frames and MTU size of 9,000.
Why jumbo frames?
Because sending data in larger packets significantly reduces the network protocol overhead. Using MTU 9000 can boost the effective throughput of a 10 gig network by as much as 25%. That's crucial for CDP. Also, it's best practice to create dedicated VM kernel adapters just for CDP traffic, with no other services like vMotion or management enabled on them to prevent interference.
And what's a realistic RPO target for CDP? Can you really do 1 second?
Technically possible, but Veeam generally recommends setting the RPO target to 10 seconds or higher. This provides a good balance between ultra-low data loss protection and maintaining reasonable network load and system stability.
Okay, CDP for near zero RPO. Now, best practice number 6 talks about integrating storage-based snapshots. How do these differ from regular VMware snapshots, and why should they only complement backups, not replace them?
Storage snapshots happen at the storage array level, orchestrated by Veeam through integrations with vendors like NetApp, HPE, Dell EMC, etc. They are incredibly fast, often taking just seconds because the array hardware does the work.
So you can take them much more frequently than VMware snapshots.
Exactly. You might schedule storage snapshots every 15 minutes to drastically lower your RPO within the primary data center. But they are not backups. They usually reside on the same storage array as the production data. If the array fails, you lose both.
So they're for operational recovery, not disaster recovery.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Their primary value, besides rapid restores, is enabling the backup from storage snapshots feature in Veeam.
Why is backup from storage snapshots so important, especially for busy databases?
Because it completely eliminates the VM stun caused by creating and, more importantly, consolidating VMware snapshots on highly transactional VMs.
How?
When you use backup from storage snapshots, Veeam tells the storage array to create a snapshot. Then Veeam mounts that storage snapshot and reads the backup data from there, completely bypassing the need for a disruptive VMware snapshot on the active VM. The production VM sees almost zero impact. This is absolutely critical for busy SQL servers, Exchange servers, etc. that cannot tolerate stun periods.
Got it. Okay, let's pivot to security with best practice number 8. Always use the principle of least privilege. How do you apply that in a complex environment with Veeam talking to vCenter?
It's non-negotiable. You must leverage the granular role-based access control, RBAC, built into VMware vCenter. Never, ever use the full vCenter administrator account for your Veeam service connection.
Create a specific limited role just for backups.
Yes. Define a custom role in vCenter that grants only the specific permissions Veeam needs to perform its tasks, things like powering VMs on-off for restores, taking snapshots, accessing data stores, etc. This drastically minimizes your attack surface. If the Veeam server itself gets compromised, the attackers won't immediately have God mode access to your entire virtual environment.
Does the backup transport mode you choose affect the permissions needed in that role?
Yes, it can. This is a key detail. For example, if you choose to use the virtual appliance, hot-add, transport mode.
The one where the proxy attaches the disks?
Right. That mode requires the Veeam service account to have the remove disk permission in vCenter. because the proxy needs to be able to detach the virtual disks after the backup or restore job finishes. If you create a least privilege role but forget to include that specific permission, your high-ad jobs will fail.
So you need to understand how the backup method works to set the permissions correctly.
Exactly. And given that backup servers are increasingly targeted by ransomware, hardening the Veeam server itself is crucial. Using things like the Veeam hardware repository for immutable backups is no longer optional. It's a mandatory layer of defense.
Okay, final one. Best practice number 10, dealing with application-aware backup via the VIX API. This is described as a fallback method. Why fallback? What are the preferred methods?
The preferred methods for Veeam to interact with the guest OS for application-aware processing, like triggering VSS, are either using network RPC calls or deploying Veeam's persistent guest agent inside the VM. These are generally faster and more robust.
So when would Veeam fall back to using VIX?
VIX, which uses the vSphere API channel for guest interactions, essentially talking through VMware tools, becomes the necessary fallback when network connectivity between the Veeam server and the guest OS is blocked. Think strict firewall rules, network segmentation, DMZs.
So VIX lets Veeam talk to the guest OS via the hypervisor instead of the network. What's the catch? Why is it just a fallback?
There are two major catches. First, VIX is significantly slower than network-based interaction. Second, and this is the critical limitation you must communicate to the business.
Okay.
If Veeam has to rely on VIX for application-aware backup due to network restrictions, you can only perform file-level restores from that backup. You cannot perform granular application item restores.
Wait, seriously, no restoring individual Exchange emails or Active Directory objects if you used VIX?
Correct. Those granular restores for applications like Exchange, SharePoint, Active Directory, SQL, Oracle, they all require that direct network connection using RPC or the persistent agent to inject the recovery agent into the guest OS. VIX communication through the hypervisor doesn't support that deep level of interaction.
Wow. That's a massive operational difference. An IT team might think they have good backups, but if VIX was used, their ability to recover specific application items is actually zero.
Exactly. Their RTO for granular items effectively becomes never from that backup. You'd have to restore the entire VM or database files and manually recover from there. It's a huge detail to understand when designing firewall rules around your backup traffic.
And VIX has privilege implications too, right?
Yes, another downside. For VIX interaction to work, the credentials Veeam uses must typically be a member of the local administrators group inside the Windows Guest OS, or Windows User Account Control, UAC, needs to be disabled. This often directly contradicts the principle of least privilege we just talked about. So relying on VIX forces a security compromise inside the guest VM itself.
Incredible amount of detail there. We've really covered a huge spectrum today, from the immediate crisis facing everyday Windows 10 users all the way to the intricate details of enterprise data resilience.
It might seem like two separate topics, but there's a strong connecting thread, isn't there?
Yeah, so
Well, the end of Windows 10 is pushing consumers towards solutions ESU as a stopgap, or longer-term moves to lightweight options like Chrome OS Flex or Linux. What do those solutions emphasize? Less reliance on powerful local hardware, more on cloud access or efficient, long-lasting software.
decoupling from the hardware cycle.
Right. And that perfectly mirrors what we see in the enterprise best practices for VMware. Things like CDP aiming for near-zero RPO, instant recovery delivering near-zero RTO.
It's all about the data's availability and resilience, almost independent of the underlying physical infrastructure.
Exactly. The tools and strategies are designed to abstract that data layer, ensuring business continuity, whether it's a single desktop OS reaching end of life or a massive vSAN cluster having a hardware failure. The focus shifts to the data itself.
Which sets up our final provocative thought for everyone listening to mull over.
Let's hear it.
When the most sustainable and efficient personal computer might actually be an old one, already manufactured, just repurposed, with a free, lightweight OS like Chrome OS Flex. And at the same time, enterprise data protection is demanding continuous high-speed replication like CDP and near-instant recovery. Are we maybe entering an era where the primary focus of IT, both personal and enterprise, shifts almost entirely away from the constant cycle of new hardware consumption?
And shifts solely onto
guaranteeing instant, resilient access to data no matter what device or platform the end user happens to be on? Is the hardware becoming secondary to data availability?
That's a fascinating question. That tension between efficiency and consumption, data versus device. Definitely something to think about as you plan your next upgrade, whether it's for your own laptop or your company's entire data center.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.